At the bottom of the world, there exists a stretch of ocean where survival is measured in heartbeats, not hours. When a person falls into those waters, the cold does not grant mercy. The human body begins to shut down almost immediately. Blood retreats inward, muscles fail. Within minutes, consciousness slips away. The wind carries no comfort. The horizon offers no rescue. There is only darkness, isolation, and the endless pressure of a sea that has never known mercy. But somewhere in those frozen depths, workers say they have witnessed something extraordinary. Something that moved with intention. Something ghostly white against the black water. And when they finally had to name what they were seeing, the word they chose was not a monster's name. It was the name we use for ourselves. Welcome to Infinite Findings, where we investigate the mysteries that science has never fully answered. The Southern Ocean circles our entire planet in a realm most humans will never witness. It is the most isolated body of water on Earth, and that is not metaphor. It is measurable fact. No landmass interrupts it. No barrier slows the wind. Because of this, the ocean here builds power across thousands of miles, creating waves taller than most office buildings. Storms that last not hours, but entire weeks. The water itself is brutally, shockingly cold. The darkness below extends so far down that even our most advanced equipment has explored only fragments of it. Sailors who have worked these waters describe the quiet in ways that stay with you for the rest of your life. When the engines cut and the wind pauses, everything becomes soundless. Traffic doesn't reach here. Cities are impossibly distant. At night, standing on the deck, a worker can hear his own heartbeat in his ears. That's what one deckhand described it as. Your pulse becomes the loudest thing in a world of silence. And in that kind of quiet, when something pale suddenly rises from below, your mind has nowhere to escape to. But before we pull back the curtain on what these crews claim to have seen, you deserve complete transparency. There is no specimen preserved in any laboratory. There is no skeleton in any collection. There are no photographs that bear scientific authentication. The creature that sailors describe exists nowhere in the official catalogues of marine life. No university has documented it. No peer-reviewed journal has published evidence of its existence. And yet, something remarkable happens. The accounts never disappear. They resurface every few years from new crews aboard new vessels. Different ships, different nationalities, different time periods. But the description that emerges is always eerily consistent. What happened to cause these educated, experienced professionals to use the same words, independent of one another, to describe something that supposedly does not exist? The term they settled on was Ningen, a Japanese word, but not a word for beast or monster or leviathan. The ancient seafaring cultures had words for those things already. This word means something far more unsettling. It simply means human being. Think about that for a moment. A 9-0 foot form drifting beneath a research vessel, and the crews aboard didn't call it a creature. They called it one of us. They looked at this impossible shape moving through water deeper than Mount Everest is tall. And the only word that seemed right was the word we use for ourselves. That single choice of naming is the entire weight of this mystery. Once you call something human, you have already written the story. You have already constructed an image that no amount of rational thinking can fully erase. You can be told it was something else. You can be told it was optical illusion. You can be told your brain was playing tricks. But somewhere inside, you will still imagine a face. And that might be the most brilliant and terrible aspect of this legend. The reason the Ningen endures is not because it makes logical sense. It endures because the Southern Ocean genuinely holds secrets we have barely begun to understand. We think the ocean is charted. It is not. The seafloor beneath the Southern Ocean remains largely unmapped. Vast territories exist where we have only estimates and educated guesses about what lies below. We possess photograph-quality maps of the moon's surface. We've left footprints there. We've planted flags. And yet, there are submarine trenches in the Southern Ocean that have never been properly surveyed by any instrument. More human beings have stood on the summit of Everest than have ever descended into the deepest sections of our own planet's oceans. This is not a conspiracy. This is simply geography and human limitation. The ocean keeps its mysteries not through secrecy, but through absence. The waters are too violent to study safely. The temperatures are too extreme to endure for long. The location is too remote. For most of recorded history, only small crews performing desperate, brutal work ever spent time in these waters at all. There were no observers watching. There was no opportunity for investigation. Just a massive hostile ocean doing what it has done for millions of years, largely unseen by human eyes. So, when someone asks why we don't have photographs, why there is no creature housed in a research facility, why there is no scientific specimen on file, the answer has nothing to do with hidden truth or suppression. It has everything to do with how rarely anyone has actually been there. And that brings us to the people who were there. The accounts behind this legend don't come from casual tourists on a cruise ship. They don't originate from online conspiracy forums invented whole cloth by anonymous writers with nothing to lose. The stories trace back to working crews, professional researchers, men conducting whaling surveys, oceanographers collecting data on water temperatures, specialists counting ice formations in conditions that would incapacitate an ordinary person in days. These were not casual observers. These were seasoned professionals who had spent years, sometimes decades on the water. Not trips, years, winters, long stretches away from anything resembling home. These people worked schedules that broke down the body and left only instinct. Their sleep came in narrow berths that pitched violently through multi-day storms. Their experience with the sea was intimate, in a way most land dwellers can never comprehend. They could read the ocean the way you read a family member's face. A whale researcher with 10 years of experience doesn't have to consciously process the difference between a whale's spout and wind-torn spray at half a mile in poor visibility. His eyes simply know. His brain has been trained through thousands of hours to make the distinction instantly. That same man can look at the pattern of swells and accurately predict the weather 6 hours in advance. These weren't casual observers. These were people whose entire existence revolved around understanding this one place. Think about what that experience does to perception. A person who has spent 1,000 nights watching the sea has developed something close to a supernatural ability to see what is actually there versus what his brain is inferring. A trick of light becomes obvious. Wind-carved foam becomes distinguishable. The brain's tendency to find patterns and images where none exist gets overridden by direct experience. This is important because it changes the quality of the testimony. When a man says he saw a 90-foot pale humanoid form moving deliberately through Antarctic waters, and that man has spent a decade studying marine life in those exact waters, his statement has more weight than skeptics typically granted. He has developed an eye for what belongs and what doesn't. He knows the tricks the ocean plays. He has seen 1,000 things that look like something else before resolving themselves into ordinary explanations. And yet, he still chose to describe what he witnessed using a word that implies intention. That implies intelligence. That implies something shaped like us. The accounts that built this story emerged most visibly in the mid-2000s, spreading through Japanese internet forums in the hours when most people sleep. The characteristic form remained consistent in each retelling. Someone knew someone. A relative worked on a research vessel in the far south. A friend's brother had been there. A man who had seen something unexplainable. A person who carried it like a secret. With each iteration, details sharpened. The length grew. What started as 60 feet became 90 feet, became 100 feet. The hand that opens and closes. The eyes that turn and make contact. The face that seems to study the observers in return. This is how legends take root and spread. But here lies something genuinely worth considering. The name attached before anything else. Before photographs. Before arguments. Before explanations. The thing already had a designation, and that word became its power. The moment you say Ningen, the moment you invoke the Japanese term for human being, you have already communicated the full story. You have already planted the image. You have already convinced your listener that this is not a biological anomaly or an undiscovered species. This is something that wears our shape, and once that language exists in your mind, no skeptical argument ever fully removes it. You can be told it was ice, carved by wind into a body-like form. You can be told it was foam and illusion and a tired brain reaching for patterns. Some part of you will still see a face looking back at you from the water. That is the mechanism that keeps this legend alive. So, where does this leave the investigation? Beneath the internet chatter and the anonymous retellings and the gradual expansion of an already incredible account, we are left with the core arguments in opposition. One side emphasizes consistency, and they have a point that cannot be easily dismissed. Consider the specificity of the agreement. Multiple witnesses, different vessels, different years, separated by oceans, speaking different languages. They never knew each other, yet they kept arriving at the same description. Same pale, almost white coloring, same massive length, same structure. A bulk at the top like a torso and shoulders, long extensions below like limbs. The logic of a body shaped like human anatomy. And the believers ask a question that genuinely warrants pause. If this were merely imagination, merely exhaustion and fear causing the mind to construct false images, why does the imagination keep producing the identical form? Why doesn't it wander? Why not a tentacled creature? Why not a serpent? Why not something completely alien? Why does it always return to the human shape? Furthermore, they stand on geographic ground that is difficult to undermine. The deep down there is real. The darkness is real. The unexplored areas on the map are real. And science itself consistently uncovers organisms we had assumed did not exist. The giant squid was mythology for centuries until a corpse washed ashore. Luminescent sharks in the abyssal zone were unknown until researchers found them. New whales, new fish, new creatures with no scientific name emerge from the deep regularly. To say the Southern Ocean could conceal something enormous is not fringe thinking. It is basic common sense applied to oceanography. But this is where the case turns decisively. Could conceal is different than does conceal. And that distinction matters profoundly. Yes, the deep ocean can hide almost anything. A 60-meter animal could drift in lightless waters where no human eye will ever reach. That is plausible. What the ocean cannot do is hide a 30-meter humanoid creature that surfaces in daylight beside a research ship. The moment something appears at the surface in plain view, it is by definition no longer concealed. A creature that large would need to breathe. It would surface repeatedly. It would travel those routes for sustained periods. Over decades, across multiple vessels, such an animal would appear in fishing nets. It would wash up on southern beaches. It would be photographed 10,000 times. The very characteristic that makes the deep effective at hiding things is precisely what the Ningen sightings violate. You cannot exist in unseeable darkness and simultaneously be visible at a ship's railing in soft light. The two conditions contradict, so the explanation that emerges is quiet but grounded in observable reality. Sculpted ice, shaped by wind and current into a silhouette resembling shoulders, formed by wave action into something suggesting a head. All of this drifting in light, dim enough that everything assumes the color of old bone, combined with something we know about human neurology with absolute certainty. The human brain has been wired through millions of years of evolution to identify faces in shadow, to recognize bodies in noise, to never miss the shape of another human being. It is a survival mechanism so powerful that we see faces in clouds. We identify patterns in random information. The consistency that believers find so compelling may mean something far simpler than they suggest. It may mean only that the legend traveled well. That once the first person said the word human, everyone after him saw humanity. The photographs remain unverified. The source becomes murkier with each examination, and the official record stays closed. Yet the legend does not vanish. It surfaces every few years aboard new research vessels from workers who insist they had never encountered the term before they saw the thing. And perhaps the actual reason it endures has nothing to do with whether a creature exists. Perhaps it survives because it exists at the boundary, at the edge of the maps, in the cold, dark, crushing distances that we barely visit, in the places where almost nobody looks and almost nobody goes. The Ningen represents something far older than the internet forums, where it gained modern notoriety. It represents the most primal fear that humans carry. Not that something monstrous lives in the unexplored darkness, but that something out there in that darkness wears a face we would recognize immediately. Eyes positioned forward-facing, scanning and searching, eventually finding us, and seeming in that frozen moment to know exactly what we are. The case now rests with you. You have stood on the deck of a ship in the fading Antarctic light. You have seen the pale form that should have been ice but wasn't, the shape that moved contrary to the current, the hand that appeared to open and close beneath the black water. You have heard the rational explanation that accounts for almost everything. Almost. So, I have to ask you directly, when you consider all of it, the consistency across independent observers, the geographic realities of an underexplored ocean, the credentials of the witnesses who understood these waters better than their own hometowns, what truly fills your mind? Do you picture drifting ice and a brain searching for patterns where none exist? Or do you imagine something that science insists is impossible? Something moving deliberately just beneath the surface, wearing a shape we were never supposed to encounter. And whichever direction your thinking leans, consider this. Which single detail from this investigation cannot be easily rationalized? Is it the movement of the creature against the current when the water should naturally push it elsewhere? Is it the description of eyes that seem to possess purpose and intention? Or is it the word itself, the term those workers arrived at instinctively before anyone could provide context or suggestion? Leave your thoughts below. Tell me which element you find most difficult to dismiss. And if you want to venture with us into the next investigation, to walk into territory even darker and more unsettling than the frozen waters at the bottom of the world, subscribe to Infinite Findings and hit the notification bell. We have more cases waiting, more mysteries that the textbooks refuse to explain. And I will be here, ready to take you through them, one carefully researched detail at a time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next discovery.